Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host Tom D'Ambra. Folks, we've thought about this program, and today we are going to get into a little bit of the particulars about our current money system and actually who controls it. If you remember at a previous show quite a while ago, we took out our Black's Law Dictionary and we came to the understanding through the language of law, and we read it verbatim to you, that we do not actually have money. And why that is because our money system is based on debt. And if you remember the definition of money, it did not encompass notes and or debt. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what do I have in my back pocket? What am I working for? What is it? What does it represent? More importantly, what does it not represent? We did take out the coinage acts from the founding era of this country, and we discovered that a dollar was based on a ratio of 15:1 silver of gold to silver, and that it was 25.8 grains of gold. So in other words, folks, there was some kind of hard currency. There was some kind of intrinsic value. If you remember, some of you folks may be old enough to remember when John F. Kennedy, through Executive Order 11110, and please look that up, you'll come to an understanding why he was assassinated. When John F. Kennedy issued silver certificates. Now, you got to think of the word certificate here. A certificate, number one, is a negotiable instrument. There is some value behind it. Okay? And number two, you've got to understand that what we have today is legal tender, not money. It's by decree. You are being forced to accept and to use this as a medium of exchange. And if you look at the very top of it, you'll see Federal Reserve note. Well, Federal Reserve, if you've been watching this program, we've demonstrated to you undisputedly, is a private foreign banking corporation. And what's a note? An acknowledgement of debt. So we are working for the script through the legal tender as a medium of exchange which has no intrinsic value. And you should be asking yourself, gee, what happened to all of our gold and silver? What happened to the intrinsic value that this country had at one point? And number two, it's a note. It's an instrument of debt to a private corporation. And folks, we've gotten into this before, but let's take, for example, the $28.3 trillion that the bankers got, all right, from the bailout. You know it as the bailout because you accept their Orwellian language, but I know it as the takeover bill. So we have to pay these bankers who receive the $28.3 trillion. We actually have to pay them an interest due on every dollar of that $28.3 trillion. So not only did they get the asset of the $28.3 trillion to begin with, but now you and I and future generations have to pay these very same bankers an interest on every one of them $28.3 trillion. Because, you know why? Because they gave us permission to print it to give to them in the first place. And you accept that. We all accept, as a people, we have got to the point we accept anything that they throw at us. Anything at all. We've gotten into this program, all the false flags. We've demonstrated to you how the Gulf of Tonkin with the USS Maddox never happened. We've demonstrated to you 9/11 being a complete inside job. I don't think there's any more disputing or any more of the facts of that. There's just so much information out there now. There's so many people on the inside. There's so many people of witnesses of fire and EMS, the forensic evidence and so forth. There's just too much evidence to deny, folks, that 9/11 was an inside job. And look at what's taken place to our nation since that point. Patriot Acts, Homeland Security Acts, Anti-Terrorism Acts, all geared to you. All of it geared to you. Most of them acts were written prior to September 11th, 2001. And there's been other false flags since then. But our program that we're going to be on today, and the reason why I bring up the false flags, folks, because they're a magnificent tool to take a gathering of people of a society down the road that they want to take us down. Now, at the beginning of this program, I made the comment about our money system. And I made a comment about controlling societies through social engineering. And you may be asking yourself, gee, Tom, what does the control of a money system have to do with controlling society? And I want to start with a couple of quotes. One of them is from Thomas Jefferson, because he was just so much on the money with his thinking and his reasoning, and more importantly, his understanding of the players behind the scenes that you don't even see or hear of unless you go out and do your own research. You think the President of the United States is controlling things. What was that famous quote by Bill Clinton when he was in Europe when he was president? How he was startled to find out that once he became President of the United States, he was startled to find out how other people behind the scenes were making all the decisions for him. Folks, we merely elect executives to an insolvent corporation. That's all we do. All right? And the current president we have, he's just a puppet of a different shade. That's all he is. Has things changed from George Bush 1 to Clinton to George Bush 2 to Obama? Nothing's changed. Same wars still going on, same imperialism throughout the world, same money system, same debt. I'll tell you what has changed a little bit. The bankers have grown. 28.3 trillion. And now, you know, we all have seen the footage of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders on the Senate floor asking Ben Bernanke, you know, are you going to tell the American people where all this money went? And Ben Bernanke looks at him matter-of-factly and says, no, I'm not. So, folks, who has the control of our money system? Here is a senator pleading, inquiring with a private banking corporation executive, begging, are you going to tell the American people what you did with this money that we gave you because you gave us permission to print it and now we owe you an interest on it? You're going to tell us where? No. That was all he said. There was no wish-wash. There was no beating around the bush. There was no, I have no recollection, Senator. There was simply, no, I'm not going to tell you. Don't need to tell you, and I have no qualifying legislative law demanding me to tell you. Why? Because the Federal Reserve is a private banking corporation. And they matter-of-factly will let you know that now. So, let's look at some quotes from Thomas Jefferson with regards to the issuings and the responsibility of government issuing the currency and what our money should be. The first part of this quote, you're going to be quite familiar with it if you've been watching this show. But listen to what the rest of the quote is here and pay attention to what Mr. Jefferson is trying to warn the American people in future tense. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their money, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until the children will wake up homeless on the continent their forefathers conquered. The system of banking is a blot left on all of our constitutions, which, if not covered, will end up in their destruction. I sincerely believe that banking institutions are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by prosperity is but a swindling fertility on an enormous large scale. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. Already, they have raised up a moneyed autocracy that has set the government at defiance. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it belongs. Folks, they have to sell war to you. Weapons of mass destruction, the USS, whatever. They have to sell it to you. But you must always understand that war is about a settlement of debt. That's what it's all about. The wars that are coming, and I'm not making predictions, I'm just reading verbatim in their own writings, the wars that are coming are going to be over which currency is going to become or stay as the global reserve currency. And what I'm speaking of is this. About 2 or 3 months ago, and we did cover this on the show, China and Russia signed an agreement where if in fact China and Russia, when they signed this energy agreement, they agreed to the terms that they would no longer use the dollar as a medium of exchange. And let me back that up. See, today in the world, the reason why the dollar, it's not a dollar, the Federal Reserve note is the reserve currency is that because any nation in the world which purchases a barrel of oil through the international market has to exchange their currency in dollars first and then purchase the barrel of oil. Hence, even though the dollar is an instrument of debt, because it's not a dollar, it's a Federal Reserve note, that's what maintained its position throughout the world. Earlier in our nations of the history of our country, people flocked for the dollar because it had intrinsic value. It was based on gold and silver holdings. But when the gold and silver was taken away through the National Banking Holiday Act, put in by Franklin Delano Roosevelt on March 9th, 1933, and we've read all this verbatim to you. When that took place, how were they going to maintain the dollar as the standard throughout the world? Well, what they did is when we formed OPEC, and I did say we, Henry Kissinger and others, formed OPEC, what they did was they said that Saudi Arabia, they said, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to protect you. We're going to shut down our oil facilities here in the United States, Prudhoe Bay and so forth. And we're going to make you trillionaires, billionaires, all the riches in the world. But what you're going to do is you're only going to accept dollars for your oil, and then you're going to take a percentage of your earnings, and you are going to purchase our treasury bonds to keep that dollar afloat and to keep this whole game afloat. So the American people are stuck in this triangle here. They're paying for the protection of and conquering of the Middle East. They're paying for the high oil prices. And the other part of the triangle at the top is that they're paying for the interest due to these private bankers on every Federal Reserve note issued. So the American people are taking it 3 corners of that triangle very, very hard. And that's just in laboring. What about in blood? How many thousands of lives and limbs have been lost protecting this fiat currency through the militarism and the defense budgets and everything else we have to cover because the bankers control the issuance of our currency. And the coming war that is going to be coming with China, what was it the premier of China said about 4 years ago to his people at what we would know as a State of the Union address? War with the United States is inevitable. That's the leader of China telling its people, okay, that war with the United States is inevitable. Now, so what is this war going to be about? Russia and China decide, the heck with the Americans. We're no longer going to use and accept their dollars for the purchasing of petroleum products over the international market. So Russia and China, Russia the #1 exporter of petroleum and energy, and China now #1 in consumption of petroleum and energy, have this agreement. And there was another agreement that they signed along this realm of a financial agreement. They also signed a mutual defense agreement. And what I mean by that, and when you read, I have not read the bill, but I have read a synopsis of it from some sources that I very much trust. And basically, folks, it's like this. If the United States tries to make a military play against either Russia or China, the other, being Russia or China, is going to join to the aid and benefit of either Russia or China. In other words, if Russia gets attacked, China is going to join in, and if China gets attacked, Russia is going to join in. So now how are they going to sell this war? I don't know. They may have another false flag and so forth. But they're certainly not going to tell you that you're sending your sons and daughters off to bleed because of a fiat currency, are they? They're not going to tell you about this agreement that China and Russia have just done. And by the way, when this takes place and the dollar crumbles, and everybody wants to get rid of the dollar because the whole world is understanding that the American dollar is not a dollar. It is just an instrument of debt backed by nothing. Actually, it is backed by something. It's backed by your labors and your children's labors. That's what it's backed by. They're not going to sell it to you that way because what are you going to tell this government? What are you going to tell the bankers? Are you going to go? Are you going to allow your sons and daughters to go? No. They're going to have to sell it to you in another way. And they will. And you'll accept it. And you won't even question it. And that's what makes me sad. They will convince the poor to go, they'll sell it to the poor to go to another country and kill the poor of another country. While the real reason for the battle is a currency war. It's a war of which currency is going to reign superior. That's what the coming wars are about. That's what the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan and all the other places we're in are about. So, pay attention to the next event. Ask questions. Be sure, folks, that this is deception. They operate through deception. We all know we've been in Iraq now, 9 years? Have we found any weapons of mass destruction? We've been in Afghanistan, now? 10 years. 10 years. Have we found Osama bin Laden? No, we haven't found him. But we're still there, aren't we? And the Taliban. This is the same Taliban, folks, that we moved over 1,000 of them. We airlifted them out of Afghanistan into Pakistan at the beginning of the war. I know you don't believe me. Look it up. Go on the internet and Google, United States moves 1,000 Taliban to Pakistan. Oh, and by mistake, they said it was a mistake. We didn't realize we had 1,000 Taliban here. We were loading into C-130s and C-141s, and we moved them to Pakistan. We didn't know. Well, we didn't know. Didn't know anything about it. We just did it. Look it up, folks. You don't have to believe me. We want you to look the stuff, the research and the information we present to you on this program. We want you to look it up because there's more. We only have an hour to discuss things with you. Only an hour. We could be here for months on one subject. $2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon, announced on September 10th, 2001. Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. Look that up. Punch in Donald Rumsfeld. $2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon funds, announced September 10th, 2001. Gee, I wonder where they got the money for the operations for 9/11. Come on. Okay, let's continue. Now, so we talked about the importance of banking money system and who controls it in the warning from Jefferson. Now, Ben Franklin makes a curious quote here about why and the reasons for what made the English transferred people want to separate from England. Don't forget, when the people of England came here, they didn't come here with the intentions of developing a new country. Yes, they came here for freedoms. They came here for reasons dear to their heart, but their motivation was not to create another country. During the French and Indian War, what happened? The colonists fought for England. And in a very short period after that, what made the American people risk everything to break away from Mother England? Well, let's find out what it was. And this is Ben Franklin's own quote. This is from one of his autobiographies. Ben Franklin. The primary cause for the revolution. The refusal of King George to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was the prime cause of the revolution. So was it the Stamp Act? Was it the taking of firearms? Of course, they were all more sticks into the fire, don't get me wrong. But what was the primary cause here? The refusal of King George to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man, me and you, from the clutches of the money manipulators, was the prime cause of the revolution. So again, another war hundreds of years ago. What was the main reason for the war? Money, currency, control of it. Very important you understand that. Now, years ago, I was reading a study from 1803, and this was actually printed in 1813, and it's called The Parliamentary History of England from the earliest period from the year 1803. Okay? Now, this is an examination by the British Parliament as to basically how they lost the colonies. How did they lose the colonies? What was the usurpation? What were the events that made the English people want to become Americans, to desire to sever their relationship with England and develop their own? This is England doing their own study so they don't make this mistake again, because after all, what was that old saying? The sun never sets on the British Empire. Okay? So they wanted to learn from their mistakes. North America was a big loss for them. A huge loss. So what was the reasons? Okay, here we go. The Parliamentary History of England, the earliest period of 1803. To a concurrence of causes, the restraints lately laid on their trade, now their trade is being the colonies, by which the bringing of foreign gold and silver into the colonies was prevented. The prohibition of making paper money among themselves, and then the demanding of new and heavy taxes by stamps, and taking away at the same time trial by juries, and refusing to hear their humble petitions, was the primary cause of the revolution. So what was it? Again, it was the control of their trade and their money system through the prevention of gold and silver into the colonies. And why was that? Because the Bank of England wanted, Rothschilds, wanted to have paper money in this country not backed by intrinsic value. They wanted to have a fiat currency issued by a private bank, at this point the Bank of England, which is controlled by the Rothschilds. And they wanted to have the American colonists pay a tax to the Bank of England because they gave them permission to print this fiat money. Folks, what are we doing today? Are we not paying an interest to a foreign bank? Only this one's known as the Federal Reserve. Rothschilds and so forth, for a fiat currency? Of course we are. We've demonstrated that to you many a time in this program. We've gone over the language on the bill. Why is there two signatories on that bill? I'll tell you why, folks. One's a creditor, one's a debtor. We've gone through that before. So I want you to think of this. The primary reason, according to the American and according to the English sides, the two adversaries of the Revolutionary War, was over the control of money and the issuing of currency here in these United States. And now we find ourselves, we've done a complete 360. We are in the clutches of the money changers, as Ben Franklin called them, as Thomas Jefferson warned us about. And it's gotten even farther, because if you remember Jefferson's warning that first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the American people of their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their forefathers conquered. Folks, do you think you own your land? Do you think you own your car? Go ahead and don't pay your taxes for a couple of years, and you're going to find out who really owns your land. And by the way, do you have a allodial title for your land, or do you have a certificate of title for your car, for everything you supposedly own. Do you have look at your documents. Do you have a laudial title? A laudial is Latin for absolute. You owned it. You owned it. No, you have certificate of title. Intrinsic value, someone bear a use of. Someone's allowing you to use something. It has intrinsic value, but someone's allowing you to use it. Think of the birth certificate. Think of this. An intrinsic value document, bear a use of. Someone is allowing you to use something. Why do you think we have birth certificates? We have record of birth. That goes to the health department. And then we have an instrument called the birth certificate. And that goes to the Department of Commerce. Folks, what's the task of the Department of Commerce? Think of it. Financial transactions. So why do we have this certificate of birth going to the Commerce Department, which is responsible for financial transactions? And then we have a record of birth, which goes to the Health Department. Does the Health Department get involved in financial transactions? Does the Department of Commerce get involved in financial transactions? Certainly does. So, again, American side, English side, they all agreed on, through independent and separate study, the reason for the revolution. And that was over the control of the colonies' issuance of currency. That was the reason for the revolution. And please don't think that, the firearms and the Stamp Act, yes, they did have very, very important in regards to the mindset of the people. But what was the primary cause of the revolution? The control of our money system. And this is why this very important responsibility was delegated to the Congress. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10. And it was very important, laid out in plain English for all to see, that our money system would be based on an intrinsic value, an issuance in species of gold and silver. And what does that do? One, it stops the government, the corporation, from printing more money to put the people in greater debt. Because if there is intrinsic value backing that money, is there any debt latent to it? Of course not. But if there's no intrinsic value, you have to issue it with debt. And there's where your taxes, there's where your children's labors, your grandchildren. Folks, $28.3 trillion, we can't make that up. What's the gross domestic product now is down to like 13 trillion? The average American right now, 57, 58% of their earnings goes to the government now? And folks, that does not include the cost of doing business in this country because of the government regulations and taxes and levies and all the rest of it. That goes on the price of the product that you purchase. Because think of this, folks. Do you think, can you afford and stay in business without passing along these liabilities to the product, to the purchase of the product? Of course you can't. It doesn't make sense, and you can't physically do it. Only the government can write, as an insolvent corporation, checks that are still mandated to be good. Private corporations can't do it. What a play on words. In the future, folks, we're going to go and we're going to demonstrate a couple of things to you. One of them is we're going to do it because of the reaction that we got from the birth certificates. We're going to review that again in the future. But we're also going to get into the corporate status of the United States. Remember, we took out our Black's Law Dictionary in the past, and we came to the conclusion and understanding through law that United States actually has three definitions. And we read them verbatim to you again, but let's just review real quick. One was you had the United States, which was the Union, the states that make up the United States. The other one was the United States that made up the geographical area of the United States. And what was the third definition of United States, folks? It was a corporation. And we read this again verbatim to you, the Organic Act of 1871, when the United States, as you know it, became a corporation. So when this corporation went insolvent in 1933 to another corporation you know as the Federal Reserve, the corporation that went insolvent gave up its intrinsic value, its gold and silver, its public trust, which was the lands at that point being protected. And the only asset they had left was you and I. Because if you read the 14th Amendment and you read the Organic Act of 1871, you will understand that basically all they did was free the black man from the private plantation, and they put all of us on the government plantation. Folks, people ask me, who do I think won the Civil War? And they expect me to say the North. I will tell you who won the Civil War. Washington, D.C. won the Civil War because before the states were in a superior position to the federal government because the states created the federal government, and the people were in a superior position to the states because the people formed the states. And if you want to go farther, God was at the top of it because they formed the people. But that whole thing has been flip-flopped. After the Civil War, the Reconstructionist Act, Francis Lieber with the Lieber Code, study these things. You will see that the states are now, in law, a subservient position to the federal government. You will see why the 14th Amendment, when you continue to read it, states that the debt shall not be questioned. Can you imagine that? We went from a constitution that mandated a free, laissez-faire economic system with an intrinsic valued money system to be controlled by representatives of the people through Congress, to a fiat money system controlled and the issuance of by a private foreign bank at the liability of the American people, with all the debts being transferred to the American people. How did that happen? How did that happen? It happened through the Reconstructionist Act. Folks, ask, what did they reconstruct? Were they building new buildings? No, they were destroying the South. Sherman's famous march to Atlanta, which is the reason why the Posse Comitatus Act was put into place so that the military could not be used against the, civilian population. So, the reason for the revolution, folks, was in fact the control of the money system. Now, let's, we're running a little bit short on time. I'm not far as ahead as I would have liked to have been, and I'm sorry for that. But I want to read a couple more quotes from you. This is Abraham Lincoln. The money power preys on the nation in times of peace and conspires against it in times of adversity. It is more despotic than a monarchy, more insolvent than an autocracy, more selfish than a bureaucracy. It denounces as public enemies all who questions its methods or throw light upon its crimes. Folks, this is the war of words and information that's being waged today that Lincoln was talking about back in the 1860s. Okay? This is the battle that's going on. This is why this show is here. This is why myself and people behind the camera have taken the risk, and it is a risk, and that should be a barometer to you as to where we are as a nation, to put out this information. Because you're not going to get this information in the public fool system, are you? And you're not going to get this information in the public media, are you? No, the public media is just a tool of control for the bankers, because the bankers control the media. Did you ever wonder why all the media every day, 24/7, 365, is the same on every station and every channel? You may have a little spin to it, to keep you in that divide paradigm. They're going to spin it a little bit to give you the right, give you the left. But they're not going to give you fact. They're not going to give you information to make you think and to make you understand why we are as a nation where we are, why we're in 141 different countries militarily, why we have bombed more countries than any other country since World War II. They're not going to tell you all that. So, let's talk about Woodrow Wilson real quick. And this basically, Woodrow Wilson was the signer at the executive level of the Federal Reserve Act. And let's listen to his quote here. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of this nation and all our activities are now in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the world. No longer a government of free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the U.S., in the fields of commerce and manufacturing, they are afraid of somebody. They are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, who was responsible for the signing of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. The fact that there is a serious danger in this country becoming a Pluto-democracy. Wow. So we're not a democracy? I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. Let me start again. The fact that there is a serious danger in this country of becoming a Pluto-democracy, that is a sham republic with the real government in the hands of a small clique of enormously wealthy men who speak through their money and whose influence even today radiates to every corner of the United States. That was William McAdoo. Okay, I mean, think of this, folks. This is the President of the United States who was, involved with the Federal Reserve Act, okay? Telling you where we are in 1913. We have stricken the slave of shackles from 4 million human beings and brought all laborers to a common level, not so much by the elevation of former slaves as by practically reducing the whole working population, white and black, to a condition of serfdom. While boasting of our noble deeds, we are careful to conceal the ugly fact that by an iniquitous money system, we have nationalized a system of oppression which, though more refined, is not less cruel than the old system of chattel slavery. Horace Greeley, that is in 1872. Think of what he's telling you here, folks. He's obviously talking about the 4 million human beings. He's talking about the black slaves that were throughout this country, yes, North and South, during the Civil War period. And he's telling you what I've told you. He's telling you that basically we took the 4 million black slaves from the private plantation and put, and let me just get the quote again, the whole working population, both white and black, to a condition of serfdom. To a condition of serfdom through the money powers, through the transfer of our standing as citizens to this corporation that you know is the government. Incredible. Just incredible. Okay, now this is Professor Carol Quigley. We did read some of Tragedy and Hope to you before. The powers of financial capitalism have a far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system is to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by central banks of the world acting in concert, by secret agreements and at frequent meetings and conferences. The apex of the systems was to be the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. Each central bank sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, to influence the level of economic activity in any country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. Wow, what a statement. So let's break this statement down here. First of all, private banks controlling the money systems of the world. The Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. Folks, we have talked about that a little bit, and at some point we've got to get into that more. And how we talked about the Bank of International Settlements was when we went to the top of the pyramid as to where our birth certificates wound up. What was at the top of the pyramid, folks? The Bank of International Settlements out of Switzerland. Okay? Now, the Bank of International Settlements out of Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. Each central bank sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, and to influence the level of economic activity in the country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. Can you just say bribes and payoffs? Hey, look what happened last week. Senator Backus, B-A-C-K-U-S, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. This was in the Birmingham News, and I'm quoting a newspaper here. Ron Paul was senior to be the chairman of the Banking and Currency Committee. Of course, the bankers cannot have that because Ron Paul has been fighting them from the very beginning, and he's been exposing them for what they are and, more importantly, for what they are not. So they couldn't have Ron Paul sitting as chairman of the Banking and Currency Committee. So what they did do is they put into position a senator by the name of Backus from Alabama. And I was reading from the Birmingham News last week, and it was a rather interesting quote. And he said, and I have this pretty much verbatim, that here in Washington, people believe that Washington should regulate the banks. I believe that we are here to serve the banks. Look it up. I'm not making this up. I'm not making any of this up. I wish I was. You know, folks, I wish I had the imagination to make all this stuff up because I'd be a retired author. I would have wrote a series of books and called it a day. This is all real. This is all going on today. This is all why we see the position our nation is in, and this is the crux of the battle. Right here, the control of the money system. It's what the revolution was about. It's what the War of 1812 was about. Of course, you never hear about the War of 1812. You never hear how the British burned the West Wing of the White House and then left. War over. Imagine that. Okay. And just some quick quotes here about the Bank of International Settlements. In a small Swiss city sits an international organization so obscure and so secretive. Control of this institution, which is the Bank of International Settlements, lies with some of the world's most powerful and least visible men, the heads of 32 central banks, officials able to swift trillions of dollars and alter the course of economics at the stroke of a pen. That was Keith Bradshaw of the New York Times in August of 1955. And I want to read that again to you. In a small Swiss city sits an international organization so obscure and secretive. Control of this organization, which is the Bank of International Settlements, lies with some of the world's most powerful and least visible men, the heads of 32 central banks, officials able to shift trillions of dollars and alter the course of economics at the stroke of a pen. Again, Keith Bradshaw, New York Times, August of 1995. Think about what he's telling you here. Think of what he's telling you here. He is telling you that another foreign bank at the top of the pyramid is in control of not just the money here of the United States, but the economy as a whole. as the economy as a whole. It's just incredible, folks. These booms and busts, they don't happen by happen chance. They happen because, as Senator Lindbergh said so right back in 1912, that economic booms and busts will now be controlled as easily as figuring out a mathematical equation. It's true. It's where we are. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York is eager to enter its close relationship with the Bank of International Settlements. The conclusion is impossible to escape that the State and Treasury Departments are willing to pool the banking system of Europe and America, setting up a world financial power independent of and above the government of the United States. The United States, under present conditions, will be transformed from the most active manufacturing nation into a consuming and importing nation with a balance of trade against it. Louis T. McFadden, Chairman, House Committee on Banking and Currency, quoted by the New York Times in June 1930. Folks, this gentleman, as we've covered before, was poisoned to death by the bankers. And also, if you look at this position he was in, Chairman of House Committee of Banking and Currency. Folks, this is the same position I was just telling you that Ron Paul was senior to be chair of, and that the bankers didn't want him in there for obvious reasons, and they put in Senator Backus, who just quote I just said to you about Washington was there to serve the bankers and not regulate the bankers. Has anything changed? Are we still in the same cesspool of deception and lies that we're in now? And we were going into it back at that period? Absolutely. Nothing did more to spur the booms in stocks than a decision made by the New York Federal Reserve Bank in the spring of 1927 to cut the rediscount rate. Benjamin Strong, governor of the Bank of New York, was chief advocate of this unwise measure, which was taken largely at the behest of the Bank of England. At the time of bank's actions, I warned of its consequence. I felt that sooner or later the market had to break. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this guy was right on the money again. Now, let's go back to Louis T. McFadden, 1930. Right? The United States, under its present condition, was transformed from the most active manufacturing nation into a consuming and importing nation with a balance of trade against it. Where is our right now, our balance of trade? We're in the red big time. Billions of dollars every year. Millions of dollars every year. Billions of dollars collectively. Okay? Do we manufacture anything anymore? We don't even manufacture TVs, folks, and there's probably 2.5 of them per capita in every household in the country. We don't even make TVs anymore. We don't make shoes anymore. Pretty soon we're not going to make cars anymore because, as you all know from watching the show, when we gave all that money to General Motors, which you know is government motors, they moved their headquarters down to Brazil along with that major factory that they built in Brazil along with Vietnam and China. Was Louis T. McFadden chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee? Was he right on the money? See, folks, this isn't happening by chance. This is a well-organized, well-thought-out process. We are financing our own demise. I have no other way of putting it to you. We're financing our own demise. Actually, it's pretty much done. It's pretty much done. Once they bleed out the last of the pensions, which they are going after, and don't say, oh, they would never do that. Folks, can you say quantitative easing? What a nice little soft word, huh? Quantitative easing. Oh, sounds so nice. Do you know what quantitative easing is? Have you taken the time to research what they're doing to our nation's future? Quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2. Now we're on quantitative easing 3 with quantitative easing 4 right down the road. Folks, you are being made liable, and your children are being made liable through quantitative easing 3 for $150 billion with a B dollars every month. Every month. Because here's what's happening, folks. The Saudis are still buying our treasury bonds, although they don't want to, but they're forced to through the OPEC Act. But the Chinese are no longer buying them, and they were the biggest purchaser of them. As a matter of fact, folks, for the last 2 months, the Chinese have not even sent representatives to the Fed auctions to purchase them. So to keep this game rolling, what the Federal Reserve Private Bank has done is they've decided that you are going to be held liable for the purchasing of these T-bonds, okay? So they're going to buy the T-bonds to keep the facade rolling. They're going to earn the potential profit of the T-bonds down the road, and you are being held liable for the payment of the T-bonds in the future, and you're being held liable by the interest you have to pay this private Federal Reserve banking corporation because they are printing the money to purchase the T-bonds that you're liable for in the future to begin with. Amazing. And the American people just accept this. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Think of this. You have a child, look at your child. Your child's bonded. Your child is enslaved to a foreign bank that you don't even understand exists and has bonded your children. It's amazing. So, let's talk. I know we're running out of time, folks, and folks, I didn't even get to cover one half of the information we have out here, but the Federal Reserve Bank is nothing but a banking fraud and an unlawful crime against all of civilization. Why? Because they create the money made out of nothing. And our Uncle Sap government, hey, I like that, issues their Federal Reserve notes and stamps our government approval with no obligation whatsoever from these Federal Reserve banks, individual banks, or national banks, etc. H.L. Barham, Sr., American Mercury Magazine, August 1957, page 43. Think of that. I mean, it's just incredible, folks. You know, I sit here and I read these quotes, and we sit here and we study and we put this information to you. And look at what you have in your pocket. Look at the two signatures on that instrument. Look at the top, it says Federal Reserve Note. Do you see anything about redeemable in gold and silver there? No. It's amazing. But this is what the wars are about. And the big war, folks, and there is a very big war coming, and I'm not making a prediction. I am just reading verbatim to you in their own writings. This is a war of currency. A settlement of debt. And what's the debt? The debt is the treasury bonds and the instruments due to these people who have been buying these bonds and supporting our debt. So again, the American people are stuck in this triangle of payment, of labor and blood, because of the control of their money system being in the hands of as Wilson put, few dominant men. So the next time they want to sell you to send your sons and daughters off to war to bleed, ask yourself why. Do the events of 9/11, do they really sound right to you? 19 hijackers outwitted the entire CIA, DOD, NSA, ASA, all these alphabet angels. 19 people? Come on. NORAD didn't respond to 9/11. Of course, Dick Cheney told them not to, as we all know now. All the molten metal left at the World Trade Center. Folks, think of it for yourself. Where's the plane at the Pentagon? There is none. And Pentagon employees come right out and say, oh, there's no plane. Jamie McIntyre, CNN News, when he first showed up on scene, I see no signs of a plane crash here or anywhere near the Pentagon. There are no wings. There are no fuselages. I see no sign of a plane crash. Folks, think of this. And don't say they won't do this. Don't say they won't do this. Because if you've been watching this program, you know, and we read it verbatim to you, that you have been declared the enemy of the United States government through the Trading with the Enemies Act of 1933, amended with the Trading of the Enemies Act of 1917. We read this verbatim to you where you were the declared enemy of the government. Don't say they won't do this. Don't say they won't bond your children deceitfully. Don't say they won't create false flags and false wars to send your children off to bleed while they profit. Wake up. See what's going on. You all know, we all know something's wrong here, folks. You know, we all see this militarized police force being built up within the United States. And now there's a push on, folks, to squeeze the last drop of blood out of this system before it crumbles, and it's called your pensions. First, they're going after the public pensions, and then once that it's in control, they're going to go after the private pensions. This is in their own writing. This is on a bill that is in committee right now in the halls of Congress. We're controlled by a banking cartel that met at Jekyll Island, Georgia, and they drafted up the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. The Congress people didn't. Why was it put into place on December 23rd, 1913, while the Congress was away for the Christmas holiday? Why? And we read to you the 5th clause of that Banking Act, and what was it? How to transfer the debt of liability of debt to the American taxpayer. Do you think they've got that under control? Because they've done quite well with it. Because you and your children are liable for all this future debt because they give us permission to print a fiat currency out of thin air. You must see this for what it is. And you must understand that you're being lied to on a daily basis. You know, I had a dear friend of mine say to me last week, and I could tell he was distraught over this, but he's been studying hard for years now. And you know what he said to me? He said to me that he's come to the realization that all the events of his life have been lies. And he wasn't talking about his personal life. He was talking about the events of history in his lifetime. They've been lies. And this poor man has come to this understanding through research, through digging for knowledge, through making the effort to get off the couch and get active. And he's come to this incredible slap in the face, understanding the research and the information and the knowledge that everything they've told him in his lifetime has been a pack of lies. And the lies continue today. And if the American people want to get their republic back under a common law system, under an intrinsic Congress-controlled money system, they must get off the couch and they must do the research and they must take that knowledge and they have to regather the power that is available to them. And one of the big ways is something that we just covered, which is the power of the jury. Folks, I didn't get into half of what we had available today, but I hope you understand just from what we did get into today as to where we are. And that if we stay on the course that we're on, what road they are leading this nation down. And I can guarantee you, it's not one of prosperity. It's not one of a laissez-faire economy. It's not one of an educated populace. It is one of deceit, and it's one of depravity, and it is one of a control mechanism by a militarized police force controlled secretly by foreign and domestic banking houses. Look all this information up. In 2 weeks from now, folks, we are going to get into the birth certificate again very heavily. And I am going to demonstrate to you, number one, how you can acquire a copy of your bond. Number two, I'm going to demonstrate to you that you are bonded. And number three, folks, and now get ready for this, we are going to demonstrate to you on this show how you can go on the stock exchange with the number off of your bond and look up the value of that bond. And I know you're saying, boy, this guy's lost it now. This can't be true. Folks, think of the word birth certificate. An intrinsic valued entity with meaning bearer use of. Someone's allowing you to use something. And we're going to get into how the norm de guerre in law, that corporate entity, is formed, and how they take that corporate entity and contract with you. Please do your own research. Please get off the couch. Please look around you for what it is. And you will see, as my dear friend who has been studying hard all these years, that your life, through the history of events of history, have been lies. And they have been lies to orchestrate you down a certain road, to put blinders on you, to not ask questions, and more importantly, to think that the people who are asking questions and making the statements are a bunch of wackos, because this couldn't be true. Folks, with that being said, again, we are very, very thankful that you take time from your busy day to watch this program. We do know that some of this information is startling to you. And we do know, as some of our viewers have said to me, Tom, I enjoy the program, but it makes me so angry. And I say to you, that anger is good, because that is a barometer that you still care. Because if you didn't care, folks, you wouldn't be angry. But you still care. Take that energy of anger and transform it into an info warrior. Get this information out. Do your own research. And you will find that we do have the mechanisms available to us to create positive change and to get us out of the control of the foreign banks and the private banks, and to bring prosperity and freedom back to this nation. We don't have a lot of time for this, folks. 1913, 2013, that's the 100-year span, folks. We're in 2011. There is not a lot of time left. With that being said, again, thank you very much for watching our program. And as always, we remind you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.